Our next 2025 Distinguished Alumni Award winner is David Harland. Dr David Harland is a diplomat and the Executive Director of the Centre for Humanitarian Dialogue, a Geneva-based foundation that specialises in the mediation of armed conflict. There's a couple of guns over here. We might need you later. He previously worked for the United Nations, including in Bosnia, Kosovo, Haiti and Timor-Leste, and he wrote the UN Secretary-General's landmark report on the fall of Srebrenica. That's Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. You have to excuse me. That's how the Māori way of saying that word. David serves on the UN Secretary-General's High-Level Advisory Board on Mediation. He has degrees from Harvard University, Tufts University, Beijing University, and a bachelor's degree from Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington. I now would like to re-invite the Chancellor and Vice-Chancellor to come to the stage to present David with his award. Thank you.
David, it is absolutely delightful to see your mother is here in the front row. Can we have a round of applause for David's mum? So, and it's very apt that I should start with a question about your family, because looking at your early history, the phrase apples don't fall too far from the trees really does come to mind. Your father, Bryce, of course, was New Zealand's first ambassador to Beijing. And as a child, you were thrust into China's Cultural Revolution, that time, that period. How old were you? And what do you remember?
Well, first of all, let me say it's very hard to follow Dai. And also,
no, it's not. No, also, you've got a pretty fascinating story to tell too.
Also, I'm a little stuck on that people really want to love each other.
We can get to that.
Yeah. No, but it's true. It was a big deal for me. And so I think I had a relatively normal Wellington childhood until the age of 11, 12, and then was taken to China in the Cultural Revolution, the last phase of the Cultural Revolution, the Gang of Four period, and put into a Chinese school. And for a little kid from just up the hill, in fact, here, it completely changed my life, yeah.
No international schools then. So language, did you have any at the time? You learned?
I had some English. But
were your classmates impressed?
No. And so I learned Chinese the hard way. Well, actually, probably the easy way, which is it's very, very disorienting for 2 or 3 months. And then you're quite good at it. And in fact, because I've spent a whole life traveling, I have learned and forgotten a lot of languages. But actually the bones of Chinese sticks with me, 40, 50 years later.
I mean, it stuck quite hard, obviously, because by the time you came to Victoria, you studied a BA, but you also did languages, and Chinese was one of them. And I was really struck by this. I learned Bahasa Indonesia at Auckland University in the 80s. And so you were with the Asian languages here. Who was learning Asian languages at that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was a funny mix, actually. There were, I think, a lot of New Zealand Chinese actually almost all of whom by family would have spoken Cantonese that was not taught at Vic. But I had several in my class who were New Zealand Chinese who didn't speak Mandarin and were keen to sort of reclaim that. But then there were also Pakeha people who were interested in the world of China. And then there were a couple of hardcore linguists and you know, languages that are remote from English sort of somehow often go together. I always remember at Harvard I actually studied a third Chinese language, Guwen, the ancient Chinese language in classical Chinese at Harvard. And we went into the exams and I was quite stressed, and they said, okay, you know, it was the old days, you know, they did exams, and they said, okay, you may now turn over your paper. And I turned over the paper, and I thought, what the fuck?
I'm in the wrong exam room.
Well, I actually was, or rather...
Thank God!
So it was Akkadian. And so there are, I mean, throughout my life, because I've been, you know, learning languages, the sort of more exotic languages often go together. So classical Chinese and Akkadian, they happen to somebody decided that they would have the students examined in the same room and so on. So anyway, so yeah.
Crazy times.
Yeah.
Academia, though, this seemed to be beckoning you for much of your early life, but unexpectedly you deviated and took a job with the UN, which really was the beginning of a career as a professional negotiator. So did you immediately know that that was work that you would be good at?
Well, I was still getting there, but no, but I knew I wanted to do it. I originally, actually, my first job in negotiations was working around with the UN on the ozone negotiations, on what became the Montreal Protocol. And I have to say, pretty early on, I realized I wanted to do something like this. I then veered off in a slightly different direction of war and peace from the environmental stuff. But even when I did that 5 years on the environmental negotiations, I knew this was for me, yeah.
How did the veering off into war and peace happen?
Well, just very randomly. I was in Nairobi where the ozone negotiations. Somebody here had a picture of me in a swimsuit, standing in a little puddle of water in Nairobi, which was quite shocking. Somebody. We were in those negotiations, and there was a lunchtime talk, and somebody had just come back from Sarajevo, where the war had just begun, and the UN was trying to set up a humanitarian airlift because the Serbs were besieging the city completely, and they couldn't get any aid in. And I'm not sure exactly why, but I had this feeling I just have to be there. So I went home, I sold my horse, I gave my riding crop to my next door neighbor who was getting married. You
literally did sell your horse.
Yeah, I sold my horse, gave away my riding crop, and swapped my sort of black riding hard hat for a blue helmet at Zagreb airport, and they put me on a UN C-130 flight into Sarajevo under siege. So, you fly over and then they circle around dropping chaff against anti-aircraft weapons, and then you plunge down, and then they open the back door of the plane and there's an APC waiting, and I realized my life had changed forever.
Wow. You spoke to Catherine Ryan on RNZ earlier this week and about finding what you described as the Goldilocks zone, which I thought was really interesting, between empathy and distance as a mediator. Tell us more about that. What does that mean?
Well, I was very interested in Dai's story about cancer and friends and professionals dealing with it, and his reflections on how to engage with your friends who have cancer, because somehow there are analogous situations in the world of mediation. And what I was trying to say in that interview was just that if you're too close, emotionally close to any conflict, it just becomes impossible to be neutral and impossible to have the distance that you need to come up with the sequence of moves that can lead to, you know, a better outcome for everybody. But if you are too distant from it emotionally, one of the natural human defense mechanisms is cynicism, and cynics don't make good mediators. So when I said there's a Goldilocks zone, there's a sort of varying zone between sort of extreme empathy and cynicism, in which it's possible to relate to the stakeholders to a violent conflict in a way that can allow you to make propositions that, in the right conditions, can lead them out of violence.
Have you been in situations where you have truly feared for your life?
Oh yeah, definitely. So I remember, in often stupid ones too. You know, like at checkpoints when you. In Congo, for example, I remember one in Eastern Congo when, a kid who's high on something with a gun wants to search your car or something. And, self-control anyway is probably not my strong point. And
that sounds hard to believe, given what you've done for a living.
But probably all the times in my life that I've been in, immediate physical danger, have probably been from not shutting up. Not counting this one.
Being a New Zealander in your field, is it when you look back at the beginning of your academic life here, what did you draw from it when you got on the world stage, I suppose?
I'm not sure. I'm not even sure I'm a Vic alumnus, by the way. I have to say.
Apparently you are, and you've got the award now.
I left before I finished because I got the scholarship to go to China. And I said I was going to finish my exams in China, and I made some arrangement with the professors and the library and so on. And I got a transcript with the grades and everything, but then I never got a degree. And they said, and when I started sending them letters from China and then Thailand and then Kenya, they claimed I hadn't sent them back a copy of Beowulf. Anyway,
can I just, David? Have you not got the?
So I have on my wall at home degrees from 3 universities, but not one of them is Vic.
Well, that's quite the revelation, but.
But they didn't.
But we have the right people in the room tonight to correct this.
They can't take it back.
Take that away.
Though I have to say, I didn't take bail, but I did take some of my undergrad books with me when I went to China and then to Thailand, then to Africa, and then finally to Sarajevo, which was a big thing. I actually remember staying up at night reading by candlelight T.S. Eliot, which is my mum Roseanne, who's there. It was her copy of T.S. Eliot from when she was an undergrad that I took as an undergrad, and then eventually I read it by candlelight in Sarajevo.
It's a very beautiful image. You have now been Executive Director of the Centre for Humanitarian Dialogue for more than 20 years. And obviously the world has changed hugely in that time. And when you look back at you began really with the UN down this path, does the UN actually have any kind of effectiveness, do you think, these days?
Not much. I think the UN is the expression of the will of the victors of World War II to order the international system, and those countries chose to order it in a certain way with a Security Council, which Peter Fraser of New Zealand objected to, the veto of the permanent members. And it was ordered the way every crisis is resolved ultimately by the order established by the victorious powers. And they set up a set of rules, and some of the rules, the UN is somewhat maligned these days, but basically two incredibly important rules came out of the San Francisco Charter. One is the prohibition on invading foreign countries, Article 2.4. Of the Charter, countries shall refrain from the use of force in international relations. And so the age of invasions and conquest was over, and it would be enforced by the victorious powers of the world, and it was incredibly important. And then for me, the other important one was that 2/3 of the world, which were then what they called non-self-governing territories, which is a euphemism for colonies, would become independent, and in the framework of that structure of the victorious powers of World War II, international warfare almost disappeared for the first time in human history. Obviously we were aware of the Korean War, of Vietnam, but actually, as scholars such as Steven Pinker have documented very well, war has never been at such low levels, and the UN as an institution was a part of the mechanism of ensuring that all that worked. And then about a decade ago, it all began to fall apart. And so the level of war is rising and rising. And so when Di was talking about how much people love each other, there are now several 100,000 people who are killed in warfare every year, and it is growing and growing, and the number of wars is growing, and the length of those wars is growing. So actually, I think at some very profound level, Di is right, that even in these wars, horrific ones, that there is a well of love and joy that is there somewhere. But we have become the masters of screwing it up, and the collapse of this post-World War II order, including the UN, is unleashing something somewhat in slow motion, but war is back and it's getting worse.
So what forms of diplomacy do you believe can work now?
I here very much don't want to give an advertisement for the little organization I run, but what I would
go for it.
No,
it's a very
no, because actually
approving crowd
is that there isn't really a full substitute for the mechanisms put in place at the end of World War II. I think had those. Which never functioned fully, by the way, due to the fact that the Soviet Union and the Western countries split very early on after World War II. But the fact that they've disappeared almost entirely now means that there is more space for the private diplomacy actors like HD, and we have been able to do, I think, some really interesting and important things. It's also opened space for other actors. Some of the small countries, normally peace agreements and international orders are enforced by big countries, but now the Switzerlands and Norways and Qatars are doing a lot of that, and a lot of, strangely, a lot of private sector actors. Elon Musk has a Ukraine peace plan, and so, yeah, no, it's not a very good peace plan. But he controls Starlink, which determines who can fight where. So he's a major player. So the decline of the post-World War II order with the UN at its center is being replaced by actors, including HD, which I work for. But they're only very imperfectly making up for it. And I think the general slide to greater and greater levels of violence in the world is actually likely to continue.
You talk about smaller countries. So what about our country? What is the most effective contribution New Zealand can make to international peace efforts today?
I mean, I get asked that question a lot, and I have to say everybody always nods, but nobody ever pursues it. But my feeling is more and more conflicts. There are 61 conflicts in the world going on at the moment which involve a state party, and about 50 of them somehow involve either exclusion or marginalization historically of certain communities and the grievances that spawns. And I always feel, and maybe no better place to say it in a marae, that our experience in New Zealand, painful as it has been, both on the iwi side and on the Crown side sometimes, is an incredible and almost unique story of now a multi-generational effort to address grievances and wrongs of the past. And it's not over and it's not perfect, but I think that as a small country anyway in good standing, and with our own efforts, however imperfect, to have wrestled with how is a country going to come to terms with its past and its identity and the issues of indigeneity that are so on. I think we could offer a lot. I think, for example, I've recently been in Myanmar and Burma, and obviously it's a very different country in every way, but who has a right to be here? I mean, is the fact that we came later, does it make us less Burmese? I mean, we in New Zealand wrestle with those issues too, and I think we have sort of more or less found a path through. And many of the countries where those conflicts are at their most savage, like I would say Myanmar and Congo are classic examples, at the core of it is one large part of the community feeling that other large parts of the community don't belong here. After
years of mediating wars, David, has your capacity for hope diminished?
Yes.
Okay.
I was. I mean, but I think it's quite objectively founded. I mean, I think it is objectively a more hopeless situation now.
It's the truth.
Yeah,
so therefore,
the unicorn is dead.
Yeah.
The iceberg has hit. So
I'm going to cling to what you said about New Zealand. That
yeah.
there's something.
I mean, there are things we can do. Also, every slide into disorder of an international system, and the world has produced lots of international systems. Ancient Greek city-states, and India, and prior to the Golden Age, or the warring states of China, and let alone the global systems that have emerged. All of them follow a certain pattern where the victors that emerge from one crisis establish a set of rules, and then those rules at some point break down, and you enter a new crisis, and a new set of rules is established. And I would say what is most remarkable about the period we are in is how perfectly we are following that slightly depressing pattern. So there is every reason to believe that the bad news will gather until there is a major crisis in the international system. I mean, what's different about the current gathering crisis is that it's not just war, and they are truly existential. That is, it's not clear that humanity will survive it. But if we do, I mean, I'm almost certain a crisis is coming, a larger crisis, but almost certainly if we survive that crisis, there will be the victors of it will establish a new set of principles and a new set of institutions. And one thing I think you can say over the last several centuries is that those rules and principles and institutions do get better every time. So if we get through the next crisis, there is room to hope.
I love it, and I'm hoping that the new rules-based society we live in is run by Di Henwood, and we will be loving each other. David Harland, thank you so much.